What's up, YouTube? And welcome to another episode of Retro Receipts, in which I look at old receipts from back in my early days of game buying. I thought this would be cool to do an episode on Toys R Us receipts, due to the company pretty much packing it in over the current time. Thought I'd look at some of the games I bought back in the late 90s, early 2000s that I still have receipts for because I'm such a complete pack rat. It's kind of interesting that Toys R Us really doesn't hold a ton of nostalgia for me because in my early childhood years, they really weren't present in the St. Louis market. They were kind of late to come here. Back then we had chains like Children's Palace and a local chain called Toy Chest that I did a lot of my toy buying at as a young child. And then as my video game buying years progressed, I started to buy more things at places like Best Buy, Circuit City, Funko Land, and local game store chains. So it's a little unusual even that I bought this stack of games at Toys R Us. However, I do have a few memories of getting these. So I thought it'd be cool to take a look at a few of the games I do still have receipts for and give you a little bit of the backstory on how I ended up getting these and also what I thought of them after I got them. So we're going to start this video with a Toys R Us receipt. I know it's super faded and hard to see, but this is from August 21st, 1999, and this is when I bought the game Jammer Lambie for the PS1. This was the quasi-sequel to Parappa the Rapper, which I was a huge fan of when it first came out. I bought this game, I believe, on launch day. I think this game actually did come out on August 21st, 1999. This game gave me a lot of playtime. Really enjoyed this game. I don't think it got as much recognition as Parappa, and you would see this game lining budget bins sealed for many, many years afterwards. So it's kind of interesting that just now this is starting to pick up in price. But this one is tons of fun. I highly recommend it. And I don't know, just kind of neat that I coincidentally ended up buying this at Toys R Us, although I don't really remember it. So next one I found a receipt for was also a PS1 game. This was much later. This was in April 25th, 2003. So you can see their receipt style changed a little bit. Still pretty hard to read because it's faded over time. This thermal paper doesn't really last, but you can see like kind of the stuff on the back there at least. So anyway, back in 2003, I bought the game Kirbys for PS1. This is a 2D platformer that was developed by a company named Artoon that put out a couple games on like Xbox and things like that, but I really don't know what's become of them since. Some reason Hudson Soft published this game, which was a little bit weird for 2003. They were not really very big into publishing at that time. They'd kind of had their glory days years before. So Kirbys, I would say I did not play nearly as much as Jammer Lambie. However, I do remember that I had to hunt a little bit to find this game. A lot of the stores in town did not have this game, and Toys R Us just luckily got some of the weirder stuff that you couldn't find sometimes. So just kind of an interesting little side note game for PS1, not really anything super relevant, and doesn't really seem to be picking up in price too much these days. Another receipt I found. This one has also faded a ton, but you can see the shadow of Jeffrey on there at least. This one was from July 27th, 2001, and this was a budget bin pickup from Toys R Us. I do remember pretty vividly that they would have these just, like, most of their games were locked up and you had to take the ticket to the front and pick it up. I'm sure, you know, everyone remembers that process. But they also would do, like, budget bins that would be sitting out on the floor, and they were just packed with games, and they would all be, like, 10 or 15 bucks or whatever. And this was one of them. This is Super Castlevania 4 for Super Nintendo. So before you get too excited about, you know, finding a sealed copy of this in 2001, consider that this is the Majesco re-release version of the game, which Toys R Us must have been a huge buyer of. I remember a lot of the Majesco re-releases, which has got the little, I don't know if that's going to focus, but it's got a little bit of the detail on there about the Majesco trademarks on there. And Majesco was just a distributor that would buy out popular titles and also some unpopular titles, reissue them much more cheaply, and sell them in bulk at very low prices to places like Toys R Us. So It's kind of telling that in 2001, they were still sitting on sealed Super Nintendo games that they couldn't get rid of. They probably had about 100 of these in the bin at the time. Obviously, it's worth quite a bit more than $10 these days, but it's not as good as the original pressing because the Majesco releases use much cheaper paper. The print work is very blurry on these, especially if you compare it to the original artwork. And unfortunately, they also switched the manuals to a black and white print compared to the color print of the originals. So this is one that apparently I've never upgraded to the original version of the cartridge, which I'd like to do and get a complete copy of that. But considering I paid $10 for this, I guess I'm happy with it for now. So definitely a great game. Super Castlevania 4 doesn't really need much more discussion, but was well worth the money I paid for that back in the day. Alright, so here is another one. This one is mega faded. You can still see Jeffrey pretty good, but that's about it. So faded, I'm holding it upside down. This one is from, goodness, really testing my eyes here, April 18th, 1999. This was also a Toys R Us budget bin special. This one is not like a Majesco re-release or anything. It was just a game that they way overprinted and were trying to blow out at Toys R Us for years after it came out. This is Kirbys Avalanche. It's a interesting little side Kirby game that's really just a Puyo Puyo game in Kirby character dressing, but definitely a fun game, and was well worth the $10 or whatever I bought it out of the budget bin for. Honestly, I don't remember buying this one, so I don't think I played it a ton when I got it. It probably was just a complete impulse purchase. Maybe I was in Toys R Us looking for something else, saw this, and decided to grab it. But nevertheless, I still have it in complete the box. So now we're going to get to a couple of the more exciting ones. These I have a little bit more story and remembrances of getting. First one of these is from, let's see, what's the date on this one? July 15th, 1998. This one I remember very distinctly getting because this did not come from one of my local St. Louis Toys R Us's. This one came from California, and I was super, super excited to get this game because this was a game I could not find anywhere in my home market. Toys R Us didn't have it, nobody else had it, and I really, really wanted it because I was getting super into the Bubble Bobble, Taito platformer, and also the Bust-A-Move character games of that era. So Bust-A-Move 3 for the Saturn was originally a console exclusive. We did get the PS1 version, but it was super late, and it was released as Bust-A-Move 99 for PS1, also for the N64, but it was like 2 or 3 years later after this one. For some reason, this was, at least at the time, one of the most difficult Saturn games to find. I mean, even working in a video game store, we never saw this come in. And just to find this in a Toys R Us in California, I remember being super excited to bring this home from that trip that we took as a family at the time. Probably one of the reasons this one was more difficult to find is this was a game published by Natsume, but it also was distributed by this company Tomo, who was out of California, and a lot of the Tomo releases were pretty difficult to find, especially back in the day, because they didn't distribute universally across the whole country. It was more of a regional type release. So very happy to have my original copy of Bust-A-Move 3, and this game also I played a ton. So thank you to the random Toys R Us in California that just happened to have this in stock. I paid $29.99 for this one, which was definitely worth every penny. So now we're going to get to my final retro receipt of the day, which was another Toys R Us purchase. This was from May 15th, 1998. For some reason, this one held up a little bit better than the other ones, so you can actually probably read this. You can see that they put this stamp on it, and this was one of the ones that they would have had to get out of the cage whenever you took the ticket to the front, and I think that was just kind of their loss prevention way of showing that the game was paid for, as they would stamp the receipt, just showing that it was picked up accordingly and paid for. So, this receipt, if you're unable to read it, is for one of the all-time best games in my collection that is worth exponentially more than what I paid for it. And that, of course, is Panzer Dragoon Saga. I still have my original copy that I bought brand new in 1998. This was yet another game that was incredibly hard to find, even when it was brand new. I remember driving all over town. My store didn't get it. A lot of the other big box retailers didn't get it. But somehow there was one Toys R Us that had this game in town, and I was able to bring it home. And I remember even then thinking, man, this is probably going to be pretty hard to find in the future, because we all knew the Saturn was dead by '98, and some of those final titles just got a much lesser print run, which we all know much more about today. So, Panzer Dragoon Saga, a game that is worth, really worth the hype. A lot of games that go for big money aren't. This one definitely gave me a lot of fun to play, and very happy I still have my original, very nice copy of Panzer Dragoon Saga, thanks to Toys R Us. I do remember even telling a friend back then, like, hey, I got this awesome game at the Toys R Us across town, and I think it's going to be hard to find, and I knew he liked playing Saturn. I remember he went the next day after I got this, and they were all gone. So I think it was just a situation of being in the right place at the right time. They probably only had a handful of these even when it was brand new. So that's a little bit about my history with Toys R Us game buys. Like I said, it's not too many. Remarkably, I still have all the receipts for these, which was kind of cool, so it was neat just to page through those today and look at when I actually bought all these games and tell you a little bit about the stories with these. So if you like this Retro Receipts series, let me know, leave a comment, and I might have tons of other oddball receipts in my archives I could talk about. I was even thinking about making a video of all the X-Video rental store games that I bought back in the day that worked out pretty well in my favor. So anyways, that's about it for today. Please take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great day or night, wherever you are.